Welcome to Most Popular, the podcast that remembers the days that square pizza was served as a nutritious school lunch option and can also explain why the nostalgia for those foods exists. Because if I ate it now, it would be so bad for my tummy. But back then, wasn't it delicious? I'm Dr. Adrienne Trier-Bieniek. I'm your host, and in case you are hearing this for the first time, I am a real lady college professor of sociology, and I created this podcast to combine my two loves, pop culture and the impact it has on our lives. Today we are talking about art and theater and education with Nick Bazo. Nick is a Cuban-American director. He's a professor, he's a teaching artist, and he's an arts administrator, originally from South Florida. He has been an adjunct professor at University of Central Florida and University of Florida, and he currently works with the Orlando Shakespeare Theater and the William Daniel Mills Theater Company. And most recently, the way that I found him was he was the director of education at the Garden Theater in Winter Garden, Florida. Nick and I are going to talk about the connection that art has with education and how kind of inserting art into things that we do with kids for fun or to get them to express themselves, or in this case, as you'll listen, we recorded this during the pandemic, to express emotions, to heal from trauma, to find a way to kind of demonstrate what they're feeling or what they're thinking and how art can bring that out. And in a lot of ways, this is one of the most pop culture topics that we can talk about because, you know, there's this fusion of art and society that underlines what happens when you use art in education, or the arts in education, I should say. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation. So, Nick, welcome to Most Popular. Thank you so much for doing this with me.
Thank you for having me.
As a former theater kid, today is making my heart very happy. So I just want to kind of talk about your accomplishments for a minute because they are just fantastic. So you studied with the Tectonic Theater Project, who are known as the creators of the Laramie Project, which is one of my favorite plays
Correct.
of all time. You were at
Mine too, actually.
Really? Of
Yeah,
course, you
absolutely.
studied there. You were at the Double Edge Theater, which, am I right? It's kind of a feminist-based theater that's on a farm in Massachusetts.
That would be a label I could definitely get behind. I'd say movement-based, but I'd say feminist, definitely feminist ideology permeates definitely in its work.
You studied under Norma Bowles, who advocates theater for social justice. I know I'm going to say it wrong. Octavio Campos, who's a dancer, and Michael Rohde, who wrote the book Theater for Community Conflict and Dialogue, which I think back in my early years of college, I'm fairly certain I read. So lots of justice-based stuff happening with you. You're a former board member at the American Alliance for Theater Education, Pride Youth Theater, and you received the Wesley V. Montgomery Memorial Mentorship and Leadership Initiative Award from the National Performance Network. I am very excited to talk to you. You are so accomplished. This is so great.
Well, thank you. I feel very humble. Thanks.
How did you get started in theater? How did you get started doing this?
I can give you the very quick story. I looked up to my older sister, who at the time was a dancer. She's about 7 years older than me, a dancer involved in like high school dance competition. And she moved in with us when we lived in Central Florida, and she started doing community theater. And she was actually in the production of The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas at the Theater Winter Haven, which is a community theater nearby where my parents lived. And I followed her to rehearsal, and I used to sit with her in rehearsal while she was working on the show. And I was like, I want to do that too. And I started taking theater classes and workshops at that same theater, started getting into plays, doing more performance in my middle school chorus, and then eventually auditioned to be in the local performing arts magnet school in Lakeland, Florida, Harrison School of the Performing Arts. And from there, I went to college, took a little bit of break between undergrad and grad school just to give myself some space to see if was the path I wanted to go on. Got my MFA in theater, And so, I can honestly say I've been doing theater since I was about 9 years old.
Wow.
So I'm still a theater kid.
I don't know that you ever actually shake the label. I think it's pretty much there forever once you've felt it. Um, what was what's the first show you really remember really loving?
Oh my goodness. Um, yeah, I think West Side Story probably resonated the most with me. I think because I have such strong memories about the music. My dad was a band geek in high school,
Mm.
and he was always so proud that they played a lot of Leonard Bernstein. Um, and so West Side Story was, always being played on the vinyl record, to date myself a little bit. So I'd say West Side Story really, and the connection to, I'm Cuban, but it's a story about, Puerto Ricans living in New York City really resonated with me as a kid, and the music is still very powerful. I think the show itself, it might be a little bit dated, but the story still very much resonates to the world that we live in here in the United States.
Oh, for sure. And Rita Moreno. I mean, how can you
Oh, and
not?
Rita Moreno, absolutely.
I love One Day at a Time for her. Like I watched that show because I just love her. Um, so you got an MFA. What made you decide? I think that sometimes, especially for students who are listening, the leap to going into a graduate program can be a little bit daunting. So what made you elect to do an MFA after taking some time off?
Yeah, I think it was twofold. I think part of me really has always considered teaching at the college level something that I would like to dabble in or be interested in dabbling in. And I knew that in the theater and arts world, an MFA is usually the route to go. It is the equivalent. It has the equivalency of a doctorate in the way that you can be a professor
Mm-hmm.
on the college level. So that was the MFA aspect of that was obviously a draw, but particularly the program at UCF, which was Theater for Young Audiences. It was so unique. It was the only program I actually applied to, which is not what they tell you to do when you're
No.
applying for grad school. They say, put out a lot of
Mm-hmm.
feelers, but I knew if I wanted to continue my education, this kind of program is what exactly I wanted to do. And it was literally in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Living here in Orlando and having such a close relationship with the Orlando rep. The program was symbiotic with the Orlando rep. And so I knew it was unique and I wanted to do something that was really specialized. And so that's what really drew me to the program.
So this is something you've wanted to do your entire life. That's what I'm taking away. Like for as long as you can remember,
Yeah.
theater has been, yeah, your thing. And now you're living it.
Yeah.
So am I correct? You're the first education director for the Garden Theater?
Yes, I'd say there have been folks who filled aspects of the role, but I'm the first full-time director of education with particularly that title and the responsibilities that kind of go with it. So there's definitely been great folks who over the years have been doing a lot of the work that I do now,
Mm-hmm.
but I am the first full-time person dedicated to this role.
What does that role look like for you?
Good question. I am currently figuring that out. So I think, I'm coming into this role. I started this in March in the middle of a global pandemic, moving back here from Boston. So part of it is right now learning how to do in-person programming in the midst of the world that we're living in right now. So I'm kind of building the structure as I'm running it. I'd say that a lot of great things were already in place. The summer programming was already scheduled. Our teaching and our staff were already in place for me to kind of hit the ground running with that. So a lot of my work currently is thinking about how we're doing this safely but also doing it to the high standards that has been built over the last couple of years. Now, moving forward, we're restructuring our staffing a little bit to that I have a closer connection now to our artistic director, Joe Walsh, and that the education department will be following as part of the artistic department and production department. So my work is to be figuring out how programming in the future kind of better aligns with our main stage offerings, which in the past had not necessarily, they kind of were in their own separate worlds. And so part of my restructuring of and looking at programming is how are we doing education programming that builds off of and complements our main stage work, but also engages community in a new way. So I am in the midst of running a program that's set and also build new programming at the same time.
What kind of...
Which, believe it or not, it's not rare for an education director to do.
Oh, no, I totally believe it. I totally believe it. I think you probably wear several more hats than you realize or that anyone realizes. What kind of education do you all offer, just in case anyone's wondering?
Yeah, right now it's very geared towards young people and youth, and our sweet spot right now tends to be our 3rd to 6th graders, just in that like tween to almost middle school age range. So it skews quite young. A lot of it is production based or skill building based on a theme. A lot of the themes come from pop culture, movies, literature, Harry Potter, Disney.
Yeah.
A lot of the programming that young people are maybe familiar with.
So maybe
they take right now the shape of like summer camps. So right now we're running a summer camp. So if you've ever been to any kind of summer camp, it has a very similar kind of structure.
Why do you think this is important for kids to have something like this in their community? Because that's a pretty significant development time that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the arts, I always say, like, there's a couple of reasons, but I like to go to the more crunchy granola answer where, humanity, the arts have been part of humanity since the beginning of time. When humans learned to speak to each other, they began to speak to each other using artistic means, whether through dance or art and eventually, theater or performative elements. And so as a way of communicating with each other and telling stories, it is literally in our DNA. So tapping into young people and catching them at a young age where they're not filtered out by what the world says is or is not the right way to communicate or the right or wrong way to express themselves, we have a chance to really build that kind of expression into their lives and into their being at a very young age, which can be impactful for the rest of their lives. Now, I'll say this from a standpoint as an arts administrator. If you ever want to continue the art form, you need to build future artists, future patrons, future lovers of the art, so that one day they are the ones who are coming to see shows. They're the ones that are supporting the arts because they remember that experience as a young child, coming to a theater class or coming to see a play, and that's impactful. It's also, thinking of like how it ties into other academics. There's a million studies about how arts education is integral into creating stronger learners and stronger students in all other fields of English and writing and in math and science. It's all connected, and really, the arts are a way of building creative thinkers and problem solvers, and often you have to have creative thinkers and problem solvers to attack things like mathematical equations or developing new technology. they go hand in hand, and catching young people at an early age is really important to kind of building that for later in life.
I would also venture a guess. So my dissertation research, I looked at how women use music to heal after they've experienced trauma. And I studied women who, if you know Tori Amos, if you know her music, I studied women who are fans of hers. And I'm guessing that a lot of the themes I discovered are kind of translating to what you're talking about, because especially doing this during a pandemic, doing art education during this moment of 2020 and how just upended everything feels, not just because of the pandemic, but things that are happening politically and things that are happening with racial justice, that you're sort of giving them this tool of an outlet, of a way to express themselves and how they're feeling and to maybe name their emotions in ways that maybe they didn't know was available for them before. And that, for me, that's sort of what community art can do. Am I reaching for kids? Am I going too far off base?
I would agree with that 1,000%. I mean, I think we're seeing young people come in. One of the things we did before our first week is I talked to the teaching artist about, there might be young people who this last couple months, this has been a traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. And you're going to see that trauma manifest itself in subtle ways that, you might not be able to name, but are going to be there. And it might not be acting out. It might not be, crying in the corner, mm-hmm. but it might be the way they talk about what's going on. It might be the stories they decide to tell, whether it's, something as traumatic as losing a family member or being cooped up for a couple months. They're going to express themselves in their art and what they're creating, and it's going to manifest itself, and you will see this. And this is, like you said, provides an outlet for expression in a positive, constructive, supportive way, without necessarily, we're not, and I always try to make a fine line that we are not drama therapists, which mm-hmm. is a very specific genre or specific tool for therapy, but theater is therapeutic. Mm-hmm. And that's just an innate feature of the arts. And so I think you tap the nail on its head in saying that, our work of arts education is beyond education, is providing those outlets for self-expression and dealing with those anxieties, dealing with those pressures that maybe the outside world is not giving us other outlets to express in.
So, one of the things I noticed when reading about you is that there's kind of a theme of the stuff you've done in your training and in your education that's a little more justice-based than, I think you lean toward that. Does that feel close to you?
1,000%.
Okay. Just making sure before I carry on. So you've worked a lot with LGBTQ plus youth. What drew you to that?
There's a lot that drew me to that, but I'll say it's honestly a very personal story. When I came out and I was 18 years old, my mother didn't take it well. She, fundamentally kicked me out of the house, although I never, fully, I had a supportive father as well, so I never fully left the house, but that she said that I was dead to her. And that was really painful and hard. And we didn't speak to each other about that for a really long time. And then I did a series of plays in college, one where I played at Rollins College, where I played a gay character who it was kind of a science fiction piece where they found out that they could change their genetic code of their baby to make them not homosexual. And so there was this whole discussion between the character and their parents about would you have changed me if you could have done that? And I think it sparked a conversation where my mom started to open up about how she felt and how hurtful that she felt that was for me. And then I directed the Laramie Project, which is why I mentioned it was one of my favorite plays.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I had to directed a full piece. And so what I learned from this was that art, I couldn't communicate with my mom face-to-face talking, but the theater that I was creating opened up the door for communication. And for the first time since that moment I came out to her, I felt like I could communicate with her. And so that was so powerful to me that I knew that I wanted to create those opportunities for young people to be able to talk to others that they felt they couldn't speak to. And that way, and that can be anything from an individual conversation with a parent like mine, or conversations with our community because we're too scared to talk and stand up. And my form of activism doesn't look like going to speak at a city council meeting. My form of activism is inviting that city council to a play that highlights my experience, because I believe that kind of empathetic experience is even more powerful to get the conversation started than even just general conversation. So that's why I've done this work and continue to do this work. I think it's an even more powerful tool to change our world.
Wow. So in a way, you're giving that to kids. You're giving them that option.
Yeah, and I think, and the thing is like, I give them the option is right. I think part of my work in Boston really was about that the power of youth voice is extremely important, and that their ability to make decisions for themselves and how they want to tell their story, and that I'm there to provide the outlet and to provide the resources, to provide the funding, and I can help build the ship, but I am not the captain of the ship. I think that youth empowerment is how we build stronger young people, which in turn builds stronger members of society. And I believe that will be ingrained in my work, as long as I continue doing this.
So my students who are in my social problems class watch the Laramie Project, but for people who aren't familiar with what it is, can you kind of briefly explain what it is and how it came to be?
Yeah, so it is a what we call a docu-theater devised piece about the murder and the aftermath of the murder of Matthew Shepard, who was a gay young man in Laramie, Wyoming, who was basically killed and left to die, beaten up and left to die in the wilderness of Wyoming. And the Tectonic Theater Project, which was a group out of New York City, came to Laramie, Wyoming, and did a series of hundreds of interviews with local people in the town, and basically created a play based on those interviews. So that's why we call it docu-theater, because the words that are being spoken in the play were the actual words of the people that they interviewed. And so it became, real life put on stage. And it's become now one of the most produced plays in this country because of the power of it. Mm-hmm. And I came out, Matthew Shepard, if I'm getting my dates right, was killed in September of 1990 or October of 1998. I came out in August of 1998.
Wow.
I was 18. He was 21. So, right after that experience of my mom, it was, so as coming out and having this national moment of a young gay man being murdered for being who he is had an emotional impact on me. And then fast forward, I think it was, 3 or 4 years later where the play came out. And Rollins actually did play. I don't know how we got the rights to it. We were the first in Florida to be able to produce it. which I got the manuscript, and it was literally a Word document. There was no binding, there was no character breakdown, nothing. I had to do everything. And so that piece of work, set me on a path to continue to do this work.
The Laramie Project, to me, is an example of activism at its best, but also, I mean, we're talking about something that happened. We're the same age, so I was 18 when Matthew Shepard was murdered, and I still remember, pretty much everything I did or what I was doing when it happened, because it was that impactful on people. And so then for the people to go and interview those folks and find out what was happening in that community, and I mean, they took the good, the bad, and the ugly. The play really shows, all sorts of sides of how folks felt about it. And then to produce this piece of art that really encapsulates the trauma and the hurt that people were going through, shows, I don't know, for me, it shows just how good theater can be and how it can really hone in on how you feel. And even when you were saying, with West Side Stories, there's problematic parts of it now, yes, but the people like Rita Moreno coming out of that shows what great art can do. She was part of tons of stuff before that. I shouldn't say that was like her thing, but that's to me is what is important about art. I have two more questions.
Yeah.
So I think this is actually pretty relevant considering what we were just talking about. But do you see a relationship between the art that we consume, the media we consume, and people's changing attitudes? So I talked to one of my friends does hip hop, and he's also a scholar and anthropologist, and he is working on an audio. He's got a name for it. I think it's like an audio history of songs that have addressed police brutality from like 1980 into the mid 90s, and it kind of shows like it predicts basically what we're going through right now. Like if there was a prediction, like if there was a crystal ball and you could predict this music from the 80s and 90s, basically laid out what is happening right now. So there's a lot of talk in music about how songs are rallying people's attitudes and making people more active in politics. Hamilton's a good example, bringing people more closer to history. So do you see a connection between people's changing attitudes in art? Do you think that it can benefit how people kind of change their minds or the way they think?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, and I will put I think you've nailed on the head also about someone predicting these kind of things. I think, the story of Matthew Shepard resonated at that time because a lot of, honestly, white parents saw their child in Matthew Shepard. But, we've known for many decades of thinking about the many gay men who died within the AIDS crisis in the 1980s, whose stories are lost or are not told, and particularly, people of color who have been murdered, especially Black trans women who've been murdered and continue to be murdered, in this country. Those stories, need to be told, are being told and are being told within those communities. But it is a true fact that sometimes that we don't listen until we see ourselves, and as unfortunate that is the reality. So there is definitely a reflection. I mean, I could say right now, Will and Grace helped my parents be better supportive of me.
Really?
I would say that, and not to get too political, but I think Joe Biden made that connection once, saying that, like, I think to paraphrase, that Will and Grace did more for making gay marriage palatable to the American public than anything else, because people could see, were exposed to these stories, could see friends, family members, and that's honestly, unfortunately, how we change hearts and minds, was when we feel a direct connection to these stories and these characters. And so that's where art really can be powerful in these moments. I think it can uplift stories that need to be uplifted, but also can make connections to then change hearts and minds. And I think I did that really with the work I was doing with True Colors, where the young people were creating this art about their personal lives, and they were going out to schools and community groups and social workers and telling their stories, and people were starting to connect the dots. And it takes time with some folks, and some folks you're just never going to reach. And we always talk in activism work. There's the people who are already on your side. There's the people who are never going to be on your side, and then there's the movable middle. And it is the movable middle that you get enough of a surge of, and then that's how you continue to build movements.
Nick, I could talk to you all day about all of this.
I could talk all day too. And my father's talking.
I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody, and which is, who or what do you think should be voted most popular?
So this one's a really hard one. I think my go-to would normally be Michelle Obama. And I think
Same.
I feel like sometimes that could be not a cop-out, but like I think of someone who took on, the ambitions of her husband, and in so many ways protected her family and was a role model for so many people in this country, that I think she, in so many ways, has a harder job than President Obama, in that she was trying to be a leader in this nation, but also a mother and a wife. And so I just recently watched her Netflix special that came out about her story, and it, to be so honest and to be willing to give herself for this country. And I'd say, there's a lot of first ladies, I could say that too, but like the added pressure of and the scourge of racism that was added onto this, and she did it with style and grace, without, thinking low, is inspiring.
My friend and I were just saying the other day that, Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high. And yet right now, all I really want to do is go low, and I must push against that and go high.
Yeah, I think that's tough. And I think, I think when you come out at the end of the day, you want to come out of this and say, I'm proud of the work, I did. And that's not always easy to do. You want to get in and get ugly, and sometimes being ugly is the high ground right there. So I honestly hope she never goes into politics herself, because I think she's can do more with her platform than being a politician.
Thank you so much for doing this, Nick. Everyone, if you're interested in the Garden Theater, you can check out the website, which is just gardentheater.org. You can also link to Nick through that. I'm going to link on the most popular website to some of the stuff we talked about, the Tectonic Theater Project, the Laramie Project, Winter Garden Theater. All of that will be on there. You can find me at www.mostpopularpod.com. It's www.mostpopularpod.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at mostpopular. Thanks, Nick. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for listening. You can find more episodes of Most Popular on iTunes and SoundCloud. More information, including additional resources for educators, can be found on my website, adriantrier-bieniek.com, and the website is listed in episode notes, so you don't have to figure out how to spell my name. I am on Instagram at dr.adriennetb. That's at dr.adriantb. As always, thank you so much to all of my students for the encouragement to keep making these episodes, and I will see you all again.